I've been asked this afternoon just to speak briefly on botanical medicines and the regulations which affect them in the UK. But before I go on to that, I just wanted to reflect on the title of this stream, which is down the bottom here: Herbal Medicine, Regulation or Education. That actually brings to mind a very famous question raised or said by Shakespeare's Hamlet: to be or not to be. You can translate that as in to live or to die, which is actually quite appropriate to what Monique has just been saying about the authentication of plants. If you get it wrong, the worst case scenario is death, and that is constantly happening. The other way you could ask that question is to exist or to not exist. And this is particularly relevant to the herbal industry at the moment in Europe, in that there are increasing regulations, particularly the Traditional Herbal Registration Scheme, which I'll go on to very soon. And the opinion of many individuals and companies in the herbal industry is that with increased regulation, it will actually begin the demise of the industry as we know it. So to exist or not to exist, that's down to the regulations. So maybe education can play a part in this. So moving on to the regulations. You can see there's a whole raft, and I'm not going to go through them all, otherwise you'll be here all night and all next week probably. So I'm just going to focus on three very briefly. So we'll start off with food supplements, medical devices, and traditional herbal remedy, which I've already mentioned. So food supplements, there is a perception in the industry that to register your herbal or botanical product as a food supplement is a quick and easy route to market. That is not the case, otherwise we'd all be doing it. There are quite strict regulations, especially if you want to make health claims. You may fall into the classification of a novel food, which is where there hasn't been substantial use of the food prior to May 1997. So there's all these regulations that surround that. The European Food Safety Authority is the main body that regulates food supplements, and they provide guidance specifically for supplements which contain botanicals, and they also have a compendium, very important, of botanicals that are known or they've received reports on health concerns associated with those botanical products. And again, I'm sure Kew has probably contributed to that. So medical devices, you wouldn't think herbal remedies would be a medical device. And back in the early 1900s, these were medical devices or examples of them. So you've got the electric belt, supposed to be fabulous for nervous trouble. I don't know about you, but I think that would make me very nervous putting that one on. And then this is one of my favourites. This one here, to stimulate the abdominal brain. Well, the mind, excuse the pun, the mind boggles. But medical devices. Modern examples, that's a little bit more reassuring, isn't it? So herbals. Herbals, medical device? No. Well, wait and see. Yes, there are strong possibilities. One example, eardrops. As long as the liquid doesn't go beyond the eardrum, you say that it's there to soften the wax, that could be a medical device. If you have lavender in it, you could say that is there for its aromatic benefits. So for smell, for scent. If, for argument's sake, you had something like garlic in the eardrops, that might be a bit risky, but you could argue the case that it's there to prevent infection, not treat, otherwise that's a medicine. but perhaps prevent. So that's a possibility. Another example, appetite suppressant. An appetite suppressant would be a medical device if it acted as a bulking agent, which then suppresses the appetite. That could be a medical device. But if your active herbal ingredient was directly to affect the metabolic rate, then that's a medicine. And the key thing here is this, where it says that the product mustn't achieve its principal intended action by pharmacological, immunological, or metabolic means. So that's what you need to bear in mind. So yes, medical device, herbals, it is a possibility. So, moving on to traditional herbal remedies. This is quite key for many companies now in Europe and actually outside of Europe. In Europe, as I've previously mentioned, a lot of companies are seeing this as a threat. They see it as the end of their industry. Interestingly, non-European companies are actually seeing it as an opportunity. But there are challenges ahead. So, key requirements, you need to actually make sure that your product is a herbal product. It may sound a bit silly, but you need to make sure that there are no animal derivatives in there, etc. And there's this wonderful thing called the 30-15 year rule. And that means that the product must have been used for at least 30 years, and not hundreds of years ago. It must have been fairly recent. And 15 of those years must have been in Europe. And this is the challenge for, like, your Chinese companies bringing their traditional herbal products into Europe, the Indian Ayurvedic medicines, because they have oodles and oodles of traditional use and evidence to support it, but it's not in Europe. However, the MHRA have said if they receive a submission that's really, really good in all other aspects, but it doesn't comply with this 30-15 year rule, they will actually flag it up to the European agency. The European agency, this is the theory, is likely to waive the 30-15 year rule as long as everything else is compliant. So traditional use, that fits in with the 30-15 year rule. And traditional use, you need to demonstrate or provide evidence. It can be something like a sales invoice. It can be your promotional material, as long as you've got a date that demonstrates it's been used since such and such a time. Of course, literature searches, literature reviews, input from herbal medical practitioners, again, that all demonstrates the traditional use. And safety, by the fact that it's been traditionally used all these years, actually should demonstrate a certain level of safety. If there is a what they call a community product monograph out there for a herbal product or a herbal ingredient, that will already demonstrate that you've got traditional use and safety. It's already proven, so you can actually refer to that when you make your application. Quality. I just go on and on about this, and it's supported by what Monique has said earlier, and it'll be supported by my subsequent speakers as well. Quality is very, very important, and that's from field to finished product. So it's about identifying the right genus. It's about growing it in the right conditions. It's about good agricultural and collection practice, good manufacturing practice, make sure storage is up to scratch as well, good distribution practice, and so on and so on and so on. That is absolutely key to the traditional herbal remedies. And then moving on very, very quickly, when companies are thinking about the traditional herbal registration scheme, they think, oh, simplified procedure, must be simple. It's not like a pure pharmaceutical product where it has to go through all these clinical trials. Simplified doesn't mean simple, okay? It just means that quite a bit of it can be bibliographical. It doesn't mean you actually have to go and do the clinical trials.